On this Monday night, Hawaii's need for essential supplies. Volunteers working relentlessly to provide relief.
We're so devastated.
Plus, the challenges firefighters faced and the potential class action lawsuit against the power company. Residents in the Northwest Territories on the run from raging wildfires, while BC braces for a heat wave. The help for the most vulnerable. Afghanistan's plummeting economy.
Sometimes I wonder if I should sell one of my kidneys to help support my family.
The debilitating ripple effects on the Taliban's restrictions on women working.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Hawaii's deadly wildfires will be heavily studied as our planet heats up. That's according to climate experts. A weekend, the damage is estimated to be more than $7 billion. But of course, the loss of life is the most devastating. 96 people have died, and for those who survived, the harrowing ordeal will stay with them forever. Yet there are also incredible stories of strangers helping others.
This wall here is the only thing that was keeping us from burning.
The Va family was stuck in traffic trying to flee as the fire moved closer. They started to run when a grandmother in another car cried out for help.
And she's just telling me, please help me, I have a baby. I reached over, I grabbed this baby. She was about 2.5, 3 years old. I grabbed her, she was sitting on a blanket. I wrapped her with the blanket and I told my kids, you guys run.
Other families were not as lucky, with hundreds still missing as crews sift through the ashes. Officials are bracing for the number of dead to increase.
We are prepared for many tragic stories. They will find 10 to 20 people per day probably until they finish. And it's probably going to take 10 days. It's impossible to guess, really.
Many Maui residents have banded together to help however they can, and that's on top of the aid coming in from the military and the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency. Cell service throughout the island is now slowly being restored. But it is just the start of what will be a very long road to recovery. Our Neetu Garcha is in Maui, and she joins us just off the shore of Lahaina. Neetu, what can you tell us about the situation there and the volunteer aid efforts?
Farah, access to Lahaina by ground has been largely limited to emergency operations and residents. Even some vehicles filled with donated food and supplies are being restricted. We're hearing one of the main needs is prescription medication and water. So volunteers like this group behind me are finding other ways to get those where they're needed. A human chain of volunteers loading up private boats with specific supplies requested by locals in Lahaina.
We are working 17 hours a day just to get this up and going, taking our own private boats directly over to our contacts. We have seen the devastation, which is absolutely heartbreaking.
Friend's remains was found in the house, so that's it's pretty sad too. So.
Volunteer Chemo Burley says everyone living on the island is impacted and they're finding ways to get aid where it's needed.
We'd much rather be driving this over there, but if we're not permitted to take that highway into Lahaina, then this is the only other option other than maybe by plane or helicopter.
We need water. Did anybody know if we got medicine?
Those who are still in the decimated community have severely limited power, cell service, and clean water. This group is trying to get them what they need.
We are so devastated. A lot of my family members have lost their homes. Also, we had them die in the fire. So all we need here in Lahaina is prayers and any kind of monetary. Everybody lost their jobs. We love you all. God bless.
I can't do anything else. Like, I can't not be here. First time we came up here, I was in tears, thinking, like, it looks like a war zone.
Our drone captured this footage of Lahaina on Sunday with buildings, vehicles, and houses leveled. It's home to heartbreak. As questions are mounting over the cause of the blaze, which is still under investigation, FBI evidence recovery teams are now on scene. There are reports as the fire tore through here, Lahaina's water system collapsed and fire hydrants were running dry. Hawaiian Electric is facing a class action lawsuit alleging this could have been avoided if power had been shut down before hurricane-strength winds hit the area.
12 to 18 trips every single day.
But for Carl Snyder and his group, even with the National Guard and Federal Emergency Management Agency on the ground, they don't plan to ease their own relief efforts anytime soon.
We brought baby formula. And this woman ran up and hugged one of our colleagues, crying, thank you, because my baby, I didn't have any food. That made all the difference.
As volunteers drop off gas, food, and water to the shores, people in Lahaina are being offered free shuttles to stores in central Maui, part of a service which launched on Sunday. The situation in Lahaina is desperate, but one sentiment we've heard over and over again is that through their heartbreak, people are finding hope, and the tireless efforts of volunteers trying to help how they can is one example of that. Farah?
Neetu Garcha off the island of Maui. Thank you for your coverage, Neetu. In this country, another fire emergency. Members of the Canadian Forces have been deployed to deal with wildfires raging in the Northwest Territories near the Alberta border. More than 230 fires are burning. The ones posing the biggest risk are near Hay River, triggering evacuation orders for thousands of people. Some evacuees have been airlifted south to safety. That includes 2 flights from Fort Smith to Fort McMurray that carried more than 110 evacuees. And more are expected to arrive from Hay River by air and by boat. As Heather Yourex-West reports, for those forced to flee, it's been a nerve-wracking few days.
Just about 6 o'clock, and you can see the darkness from the smoke.
In the South Slave region of the Northwest Territories, residents had little time to pack up and go.
They barely made that through. They were driving through flames.
As the fire approached the only highway out of Hay River, Ashley Gressel FaceTimed her family as they made their harrowing escape.
You can just hear everybody really panicked, and my mom was trying to coordinate my dad through literal flames. Like, there's flames on both sides. They ended up in the ditch once and they got out, and there was a semi-truck completely engulfed in flames that they had to get around.
It was a quickly advancing fire from Alberta that forced residents of Fort Smith and Hay River to flee.
Then we have SS-052, which is moving east. That one's moved through Enterprise towards Hay River and Fort Smith.
South of Hay River, fire swept through the hamlet of Enterprise.
We currently have our crews doing some assessment of the area to figure out exactly the extent of the burning and the structural loss. At this time, we don't know.
Updates are slow because across the region, the fire has compromised communication lines as well.
I think people are very scared. People are trying to get a hold of their relatives, and they can't.
By Monday, anyone left in Hay River was told to head to the airport. The highway now completely closed.
A Hercules actually flew in from Fort Smith this morning. I didn't know until early this morning that it was a Hercules. So they were thankfully able to get a large group out.
A number of flights from Fort Smith or Hay River brought evacuees to Fort McMurray throughout the day. Military help is expected to arrive in the region Tuesday. Officials say it is not safe for anyone to stay. Heather Yourex-West, Global News.
A heat wave is settling over much of British Columbia, and it's expected to last until at least Thursday. Areas of coastal BC could see temperatures hit the mid-30s, while areas further inland could hit nearly 40 degrees. More than 600 people died during the unprecedented heat dome in 2021 in BC, and health authorities are urging people to take this heat warning seriously. Global's Grace Key is in Vancouver. Grace, what's being done to help vulnerable people in this weather?
Farah, I'm in the city's west end. A lot of the apartments here are older with no air conditioning. This neighborhood also has one of the highest concentrations of people in the region. A lot of them are seniors. The 600 people who died during the heat dome, a majority of them were seniors, and many of them died indoors.
Gel Pack is in here to keep things cool.
So for the second year in a row, the City of Vancouver and the local health authority have teamed up with community groups to hand out cool kits. Now there's a spray and water bottle, gel compress, towel, and a small container you can fill with water, and a thermometer to check indoor temperatures. Temperatures above 26 degrees may be unsafe for vulnerable people, and anything above 31 should be avoided for those at a greater risk of heat illness. And we can certainly all do our part. Check on your neighbors and elders.
The best thing we can do is support seniors to help other seniors. So we've trained seniors in our community to have the knowledge and resources to do heat checks with their own colleagues and friends. So they look after each other, and along the way they build up their own knowledge of what to look for.
It's certainly not expected to heat up like we saw during the heat dome, but many agencies are taking the lessons we learned from a couple of years ago and trying to be proactive now. Farah?
Grace Key in Vancouver. Thank you, Grace. A judge in Montana has ruled in favor of a group of young climate activists who argue state agencies were violating their constitutional right to a clean environment. The judge found the state was violating the rights of young people with policies that permitted fossil fuel development without considering the impact on the climate. The ruling is the latest in a small number of decisions around the world that affirm a government's duty to protect its citizens from climate change. To the political turmoil in the U.S. now. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is on the verge of being indicted in a fourth criminal case, this one involving his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results in the state of Georgia. The grand jury began hearing the case today and could decide on charges as early as tomorrow. As Jackson Prosco reports, the potential charges are sprawling.
Under tight security, an Atlanta grand jury faces a heavy task, weighing charges against a former president for alleged election subversion. More than 2 years of investigation by District Attorney Fani Willis have led to this point.
Fani Willis understands that this was not a couple of one-off criminal acts that she wants to prosecute, but rather a full-fledged, fully developed conspiracy to overthrow the election.
More than a dozen Trump allies also risk being indicted as prosecutors link together multiple threads from the aftermath of the 2020 election. From the Trump supporters caught accessing voting machines to Republicans who falsely signed paperwork claiming Trump won Georgia. And then there are Trump's own letters and phone calls pressuring state officials to overturn the rightful outcome of the vote.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
A perfect phone call, according to Trump, but prosecutors see a likely conspiracy. They seem set to bring racketeering charges and charges of making false statements, among other felonies.
Biden's newest lackey, Atlanta DA, Fani Willis.
Trump is already lashing out, running commercials attacking the DA.
So dishonest.
On social media, he's going after prosecutors and witnesses in a risky legal strategy.
That may be the quickest way for the former president to be wearing an orange jumpsuit. So he needs to be really careful. You don't want to be seen as intimidating witnesses or trying to intimidate prosecutors.
That does not seem likely to dissuade the former president, who has long claimed he is in fact the victim. If convicted of state-level charges in Georgia, he would not be eligible for a presidential pardon. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
A supermarket in Odessa has been destroyed following a Russian missile attack. Ukrainian authorities say 8 missiles and 15 drones were intercepted by its air defense systems, but falling debris sparked fires at several buildings, causing extensive damage. At least 3 people were injured. Ports in the Odessa region have come under heavy fire by Russia since the collapse of the Black Sea grain deal last month. Tragedy strikes a quiet neighborhood. Coming up, the deadly blast that obliterated 3 homes. Europe's most active volcano is at it again as Mount Etna puts on a mesmerizing display. It's located in the Italian island of Sicily and rarely causes significant damage, although the eruption's volcanic ash is forcing the temporary closure of Sicily's Catania airport. Mount Etna is believed to have the longest documented history of eruptions among all volcanoes, with records dating back as early as 425 BC. At least 5 people were killed in a Pennsylvania house explosion that was caught on camera, and a warning: some of these images might be disturbing. That blast obliterated the home and 2 others. It blew out the windows and doors in about a dozen neighboring houses as well. 3 residents were injured, and nearly 60 firefighters were treated for medical issues when flames rapidly spread. The cause of the explosion is still under investigation. Plunged into poverty ahead, how the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan is crippling the country's economy. At least 36 people are feared dead in Myanmar after being swept into a lake by a landslide at a jade mine. 8 others were injured and taken to hospital. It happened in Picant, an area known for the world's most lucrative jade mines. Mining operations had been suspended because of the rainy season. However, many of those missing are believed to be locals who were digging through the mud looking for precious stones. Afghans around the world are preparing to mark a grim anniversary. Tomorrow marks 2 years since the Taliban seized control of Kabul. The country's economy has been pushed to the brink of collapse in that time. The UN says the number of Afghans living in poverty has nearly doubled, soaring to 34 million people. In part 2 of our series on the plight of Afghans, Shagufa Danish looks at the struggle to survive under Taliban rule.
In downtown Kabul, Ahmad Masood's grocery store shelves are fully stocked. But these days, he says customers are in short supply.
A lot of stores aren't doing so well. That one used to be a tailor shop, and it had to close because it wasn't getting any business.
All across Afghanistan, families are struggling to survive. In a country of just over 40 million people, the World Food Programme says 92% of people in the country do not have enough to eat, and 6 million are just one step away from famine. 2 years after the Taliban stormed to power, Afghanistan's economy remains shattered. 900,000 Afghans have lost their jobs, according to the International Labour Organization. And women like Zainab Rezai have borne the brunt of Taliban's crippling restriction. Rezai used to be her family's breadwinner. She worked 2 jobs to support her widowed mother and siblings, until the Taliban made it illegal for her to work those jobs.
I have nothing left to sell. Sometimes I wonder if I should sell one of my kidneys to help support my family.
Experts say the Taliban's crackdown is putting women's lives at risk.
Women are dying right now because of lack of access to healthcare, because of barriers the Taliban have put in the way.
So far, the Taliban's efforts to get Afghanistan's economy back on track have failed. Businesses aren't investing, construction has ground to a halt, and hundreds of thousands of Afghans are out of work. Even the Taliban admits the situation is dire.
Because of the international restrictions placed on our government, we have no access to our assets, so our economy will continue to struggle.
Countries around the world, including Canada, have refused to recognize the Taliban, making it harder to deliver humanitarian aid. The NDP's Foreign Affairs critic says Canada needs to do more.
We need to be able to get dollars into Afghanistan to make sure that those people are able to eat, are able to survive, and we have to do that despite the Taliban.
Until the Taliban comes up with a plan for the country's economy, there is little hope the situation will improve. A bleak outlook for Afghans already struggling to survive. Shagufa Danish, Global News, Ottawa.
Tomorrow, Shagufa looks at the Taliban's systematic crushing of rights, especially for women and girls, and what it's like to be banned from participating in public life in Afghanistan. Tonight's Your Canada is this hot air balloon over the Old Man River in Lethbridge, Alberta, and we love seeing your Canada. So please keep emailing us your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.